Hey, Blockhead traders. Here at Blockhead Traders, I must inform you that we are not financial professionals. Nothing we say should be considered financial advice. We offer our own thoughts and opinions to you, the viewer. We expect you to take these opinions, form your own financial opinions, and make your own financial decisions. Today is Wednesday, December 21st, 2022, and this is Blockhead Traders Weekly. In this week's episode, I'm joined by fellow Blockhead trader Viper XL 007, and we are going to take a quick review of some of the ongoing 1% trades. I have a $20 scratcher for you to play this week, and then we're going to dip back into the world of crypto. But before we hop to that, I want to give a shout out to our Discord, a link in the description below. Join us, say hello to myself, Viper, the other Blockhead traders. Love to hear what you're trading, love to hear the type of content you want to hear about. You can also pick this up wherever you get your podcasts, as it is released as an audio version there. Lastly, go to thetagang.com/sprocket888, where you can find each and every one of my trades, the good, the bad, and the ugly. Viper, it is Christmas week this week in the markets, and everyone was wondering if the Santa Claus rally was going to surface. Sure didn't look good on Monday, and today, I'm not sure. I might hear sleigh bells. We'll have to see.
I mean, the real Santa Claus rally happened one night, so I mean, we got time, right?
Yeah, that's going to be, though, market closed. I mean, you have to play it in crypto land. Yeah, consumer confidence data came out today. I guess it was better than expected. I really didn't follow much. I just know that I looked down around lunchtime and I thought there might have been sleigh bells coming. Unfortunately, let's recap some of these 1% trades because, well, Santa's not coming yet to those. So right now, the outstanding ones that we still have open are Kohl's. That is a short put vertical. And then the other one is a trade on the micro crude futures. You can see both of those are down presently and not looking good. Yeah, Kohl's just not doing so hot. Let me show you on the graph here. You can see these are the boxes when we put the trade on. That's the beginning of the box is when the trade went on. The end of that box is when the trade is up. You can see that we are going in the 100% wrong direction here for Kohl's. So it is not looking good that this thing is going to bounce back out of there and pull into that green. But we're about halfway through. So we'll let this one keep going because the plan here was you exit for 50% profit, or you ride this thing to the bitter end to see if it'll pop back up into your range and you can get out for a winner, but not looking good. If we hop over to where the oil trade is looking, again, this one not looking super hot again. So we were kind of banking on oil staying inside that channel. We were off to a great start where we kind of got a nice drop right off where we kind of expected. And the past couple of days, we've gotten quite the oil crude rally. We'll see if this is sustained up here above the channel, but this is basically breaking out of the channel, which is a sign for a potential level reversal. And remember, this was short oil. So this one too is going in just the wrong direction. So, presently we're down about $69 on Kohl's and we're down about $30 on oil. And we'll just have to see how that goes. Yeah, Viper. So I want to throw out another trade here for this upcoming week. And I'll be honest, I did not get a lot of time to try to search for the next trade. So the markets have been kind of crazy. I've been kind of crazy, leading up to the holidays and all that. So I did a little bit of search tonight. I went to some of my favorites. Citigroup jumped out to me. It's one of the ones I'm bullish on banks. You can look at the stocks and be like, what's wrong with you? This thing is going to zero because it's been kind of on a slide for the better part of 22. But my thesis here, I'm going to pull up the chart just to kind of throw where it's at. You can see that's basically all of 22, a little bit of 2020, big rally there in early 21, late 2020. banks do pretty well in higher interest rate environments. They don't do well in rapidly changing interest rates environments, and they don't do well if there's not good consumer market out there, like consumer spending, things like that. When the consumer is hurting, then there's more defaults. The loan business is not as good, things like that. And so I think that might be why they've taken a big hit. I do fundamentally believe the banks are in a 100% different position now than they were in 2008. And I think a lot of the pricing that's been going into banks have really kind of beaten them up, like this was the 2008 financial crisis, doom and gloom coming out there. And this is a very atypical trade of mine that I'm going to put on, but this is all about exploring new things, trying new ways to trade. And I'm going to call this kind of a scratcher because this approach is, it's probably as close to gambling as I think you can kind of get. It's a little rooted in fundamental price action here, I believe. But basically, we're just going to buy a call. And the reason we're going to buy a call is because the volatility actually in the banks is pretty low historically over the past year and stuff. The volatility has really dropped off. And remember, that means that premiums are kind of low. And so when premiums are low, it's okay to buy the premium. And I wanted to not really spread this into a vertical because I really think this could potentially be close to the bottom for some of the banks. And so in this case, I don't want to go very close to that $100 buying power limit because this really is a low probability trade. So think of this really like a lotto scratcher. That's what I call this. It's going to be about a $20 trade. And because we're buying the premium, I want to try to give ourselves more time. So you don't want to give yourself too much time where just the theta just becomes very expensive in the premium, but you don't want to make it too short because then the theta declines very quickly. And so what I'm looking at is a March monthly expiration. So it's going to give me about 3 months of time out there. And a $55 call is going for about $20 in Citigroup right now. And so in the chart, you can kind of see, where Citigroup has been. And this particular level that we're hanging at right here is an interesting level between the 40 to 45. That's really where the 2020 came down and bounced off of. If we even just go further back in time, there's other multiple levels where this was just kind of important, where it started other big swings. And so does this really say much? No. But remember, we're keeping this trade small, $20, because worst case scenario, you're out $20. Best case scenario, there's no limit to the upside here. And so let me just switch over to what the profit and loss graph looks like, because this is where it gets a little interesting. So at $55.20, that is where we will break even. So if the stock price gets above $55.20, you're effectively long those shares at $20 for all 100 of them. And so you can see that this P&L, let's say Citigroup basically topped out more recently in the mid 60s. So you get up to the mid 60s and this thing will return, $1,000. That's going to be your profit on that. So this really is a scratcher because the probability of this happening is very small. This is an 8 delta, which basically means there's an 8% chance that this stock is going to make it to this $55 strike. However, I do think that there is winds that are going to blow in this favor, and this purple line, you can see we'll start making money a little bit sooner. So we could potentially close this thing out for a profit, even if Citi rallies up a bit. And we really have until the 3rd week in March. So, hey, it's the holiday times, Santa Claus rally, $20 on a lotto ticket. See what happens.
I mean, also, show me a $20 lotto ticket with an 8% chance of winning.
That is true. Those lotto tickets don't have anywhere near that. So you buy a $20 scratcher, you're probably not looking at an 8% chance of winning something.
Not at all.
So Viper, that's what I got this week as far as the 1% picks. A little bit slim pickings from the screener. I'll try a little bit harder in future upcoming episodes. It is really kind of tricky to stay within that $100 size limit. There was a few plays that did jump out, but the position sizing was just a little bit too big, so I couldn't bite on them. So Viper, it's been a while since we talked about crypto, and you know, one of our favorite crypto projects has been going through quite a bit of changes to some of their structure in the game. And I'm gonna be honest, I don't really quite understand them all. So I'm just harvesting egg and stuff. I'm hoping maybe you can teach me a little bit about what some of those changes are.
Yeah. So the initially, you know, right off the top, because obviously everybody has certainly heard of crypto both over the past year and a half and absolutely over the last month or two. So just like the disclaimer at the top of the show, this is like double, triple, quadruple that disclaimer of, you know, we're exposed to this, we're in this. So that's a bias right there of, you know, being in this and you know, invested in this, but also the cautionary of, you know, this is the Wild West of stuff. And every time we talk about crypto, I'm going to probably repeat this same thing over and over again, because while we're having fun, I believe, I mean, I'm pretty sure Sprocket still is. You know, that doesn't, you know, that can paint a dangerous picture to someone thinking they can just go running blind into this. And that's not the point. The point isn't to, you know, trigger your FOMO and get somebody to rush in. I genuinely find what's happening here on, you know, this project interesting, you know, curious to see how it goes, you know, that sort of thing, like the thinker tinker mentality of, you know, this is just a new thing. Literally nobody can tell you what's going to happen to it. Nobody that says it's going to the moon can back that up. Nobody that says it's going to zero can back that up. You know, it's just a thing, an experiment, the great experiment. So that said, I wanted to try to, like, I don't know, try to contextualize this a little bit. So let's get a little visual. And, you know, this is, as we've mentioned before, the Project Chikn. And they have, you know, as far as the world of crypto, they have cleared some pretty massive hurdles so far. They just celebrated their 1-year birthday, and they have officially been around doing things for a year, continuing to deliver big project milestones. And one of the things that I enjoy about them is just how they run themselves like a business, you know, in a space where that is very rare. But nonetheless, a quick recap of what's happening here. So this is kind of where things started. You have your Chikn NFT, and it lays this egg token perpetually, forever. It will always lay egg depending on how large it is. And then you also have these roosters, and they eat the eggs, and that's how they get bigger. And the bigger they are, the more of this FERT, for fertilizer, token that they lay. So we have this feeding loop here. Then you can take that fertilizer, and we have done some discussions on liquidity providing and LP. So I don't want to hash into that too much, but absolutely happy to do videos and pure based subjects, you know, videos based on that. But nonetheless, this is your farm. This is your farmland here. And you use this to provide liquidity to the ecosystem. So in this case, these tokens that I just mentioned, FERT and egg, you could pair that up and provide liquidity. You get a reward for doing that, for providing that liquidity, which is currently coming out in this additional token called Worm. And it's a dual reward. So it's going to be Worm plus partner token, because the project is partnering with other tokens. And previously it was providing Worm and feed. And previously we mentioned Sprocket's grand division plan was to provide liquidity, get his feed bag gone, get a big feed bag going, and then just let's see, because the tokenomics of feed was that it was fixed and finite, and there would be a point where absolutely no more feed would enter the market. There is an in-game gamified thing where that feed is consumed because you feed that feed directly to your chicken NFTs to make them bigger. So the bigger they are, the more egg. That's your little self-feeding loop there. So Sprocket's initial play was to stack feed, and let's see what happens when that feed runs out. But for the fertilizer, you can fertilize your farmland. As you can see here, I have a 6.25x multiplier on my farmland, which just means my base rewards of worm and the partner token are multiplied by 6.25x of a max cap of 16x. So I can continue to take my fertilizer and fertilize my land, just like a good farmer does, and get more rewards tokens out of that. So that part was, I think, all pretty straightforward, and it's still perfectly there. Before we go into the more newer stuff, which I'll call more gamified stuff, I don't know if there's anything you want to comment on that specifically or call out.
No, I think that pretty much well sums it up. The jury's still out on the feed, what's going to happen to that, but that's not the point here.
Yeah.
It's more we're kind of moving into a gamification, and it's causing me to have to scratch my head and think more. I don't know if I like.
Yeah, and I'm the same way. The community is the same way. It's been a little bit of a turbulent bump here as we get more into the gamified stuff. But I mean, the team, the developers, they knew this was coming. They signaled it for at least the last month or two. They constantly said, we're going to make a shift, and we think it's going to be a little bumpy for some people, but we think there's long-term sustainability, good at play here. So to unpack that just a little bit more, I mean, the big vision of this is they want to be a game. They want to be a game studio, a game platform, if you will. So a PopCap or the makers of Heyday and Boom Beach and that sort of thing. They want to be that company in the Web3 crypto space. And so you like all of those games have in-game economies. We're all familiar with it because they're microtransactioned out of like you get the game and then it's like, hey, you can grind to earn this token naturally or pay us $100 and we'll give you a whole big bag of these tokens. And the difference here is they're trying, Chikn is trying to establish that economy in this world of decentralization, in this world of player supplied economy. So up until this point, I mean, it's been a solid year of trying to establish this economy and not have it, get wrecked for, people farming it and selling and whatever. Because this is still, laws of economies are universal when you're dealing with things of value and money. So all things considered, I think they've done a pretty good job at establishing that base economy. But then, like you said, things are getting a little more weird because more gamified elements are coming in. One thing then to continue where the utility of these tokens go is you have these worms, and they unveiled a new feature called your worm farm, which you can see a snapshot of my worm farm here, where your farmland, as you can see from this top picture here, you get one underneath each of these tiles. There's 5, little like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Each of these rows is representative of one tile on my farmland. And I mean, like all soil and farmland, you have creatures living underneath. And in this case, you have worms living underneath your farmland tiles. So as you can see here, I have 3 by 5, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19. I have 19 tiles on my farmland. So I have 19 rows to my worm farm. And utility is big on those tokens, that economy. So as you can see here, in order to explore my worm farm and expand it, I have to dig and burn some egg tokens. In this case, to get to my next spot on my worm farm, I have to spend 60 eggs. to dig that out, and then I have to release the worms. And what you see is once you dig that out, then you fill it up with worms, and those worms are going to work for things called blueprints, which is where I believe a lot of the understandable confusion is really starting to come in for Sprocket, for people in the ecosystem, certainly for people watching. So you get those blueprints, but backing up a second before we understand the blueprints, the farm, another gamified element here, is these tiles. I mean, these are gorgeous little tiles, and these are all randomized. And you could think of, I mean, the farmland is one NFT, but each of these tiles is almost like a little mini NFT, and they produce different resources. So, for example, this little magic fairy garden over here, this actually produces this blue crystal up here called mana. So now what we're looking at right now is now this is pure game. This actually doesn't happen on chain. What these resources and stuff, this is all happening off chain, and then pieces of it can sync onto the blockchain to basically like save your status, but also lock in, whatever you have to go to the marketplace with for any open market trading. So off chain, this would be like if this was a mobile app, you'd open the app and you'd have this farm here, and you'd be able to, what you can see here is send out roosters or chickens, and they roam around for 24 hours. There's things you can do to speed that up, but they roam around and they collect resources off of your land. And so you can see up here the resources that my land is collecting is lumber, water, vegetable, gold. Mana is the crystal. Mech is this cool orange bolt. And I'm also getting some rocks. And you can see over here, this is the full list of the resources, and I'm missing dark matter, evaxium, and tungsten. I do not have a tile on my farmland that produces that, but you can see I'm missing a couple spots. I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 tiles missing. So there's a chance that I could reveal one of these tiles, which you reveal again through burning eggs. I could reveal a tile that produces one of these 3 things. Honestly, that's what I'm hoping for, but we'll see. So important thing though is resource collection. So you send these things out, you send these chickens and these roosters out, they go and forage and they collect all of these resources. And I'm speaking in game terms now, but you'll take these collected resources and you'll be able to craft things with them. You'll be able to craft things called equipable items as well as consumable items. And anyone with a gamer's mentality, you can go down the trail of what that means. But more simply, an equipable item is just as it sounds, it's an item that you equip to your character, a sword, a shield, whatever. And a consumable item is like a potion to restore health and that sort of thing. So that's what the resources are to create those elements. So for example, if we take a look at this particular rooster here, which is, I think, a pride and joy from Sprocket's roost. He's a very attractive bird. You can see that he has some properties to it. So he has these fat pipes, which are the gas guzzler, and that gives him an advantage to foraging and collecting the mech resource. But what's important here is his head has nothing assigned to it, and his torso has nothing assigned to it. So in that world where you build those equipables, you craft those equipable items, you can equip those to the head. There's maybe a helmet that you can equip and attach to his head as long as the head is empty. Same with the torso. And these equipable items will do several things. One, it could be a boost for that resource gathering, or 2, it could be an armor boost or an attack boost, because there is an entire element of the game that hasn't come out yet that should be due sometime next year, where there will be fighting. There will be cockfighting between roosters and roosters, or roosters and chickens. So again, pure game terms on that front, as to equipping things to gear up for those battles in the game. But back to the blueprints then. So what we have right now is blueprints are scattered throughout your worm farm, randomly generated in increasing rarity from the top of your farm all the way to the bottom. So now we're kind of back into the blockchain value, built-in value sort of thing. So every farmland has these worm farm underneath. And this is kind of one of those things that I think is super neat and interesting that the team is doing here, because these blueprints get scattered randomly across your worm farm. Like I said, these are actually 2 blueprints that I've already collected out of mine, and they were in these last 2, slot 4 and 5. But the cool thing is they're releasing these blueprints in batches. And so this initial batch, I think, was, I'm honestly not exactly sure, but I think it was around 2,500 or 3,000 that they randomly sprinkled through everybody's worm farm, whether or not you have the worm farm dug. And what I think is the coolest thing, permanently. So whatever got sprinkled into my worm farm is there. It's there forever. It's there whether I dig to it in the next week. It's there whether I dig to it in the next 5 years. It's there, and if I sell my farm before I dig through the rest of that worm farm, it's still there for whoever buys my farmland to discover. And they'll go through cycles of releasing more of these blueprints, sprinkling them around the same exact way. So you can imagine, even if you're taking your time slowly digging through your worm farm, there's an increased value to the game front that you have stuff in there to discover. That's just always there waiting for you to discover it. Nobody can rush you to it. Nobody can steal it from you. And I think that's really cool. It's similar to revealing these tiles, these resource tiles. Whatever's missing here, it's there. I just need to reveal it. So it's similar over here. So, but what do we do with these blueprints? So this initial batch of blueprints were all equipable items, and they were equipable for the farmland itself. And so we can see I have a log cabin as one of them, and I have this other one called an avaxium seam. And you can see right here it says turn a blank tile into an avaxium tile. And so all that means is, remember what I said up here, I'm currently not producing any avaxium on my farmland, which is a bummer. That's a pretty rare resource. I would like to have some. However, I do have empty green grass spaces. So now that I have this blueprint, I can, once I craft this, so I still have to craft it, which you still have to pay resources to craft it. But once I craft it and this gets colored in, I can then drop that avaxium seam onto one of these blank spaces on my farm. And all of a sudden I will start producing avaxium, but I will produce it at a reduced rate to if it was a natural tile. So like I mentioned, this circle up here does mana. If somebody had the equipable that started to produce mana, similar to the avaxium seam, if I'm doing, say, one unit of mana per day, they would do 0.5 units. I mean, just numbers off the top of my head, but the point is, if you reveal a natural tile, that will produce the most resources. But this is the next best way then to produce all the resources you want. So that's at least the high level connectivity of all of this. How the heck does this relate to investing or playing with your money, or I mean, I can, that's the next stage, because there are some strategies now with this understood that I think are very interesting. But I'm going to pause there and see if that makes any sense or clears anything up for you.
Yeah, it does a little bit. I guess my question is about the worms and when you deploy them, because I think when they go in, they never come back out. So you want, I think my first tile is like, oh, you got to put 1,000 worm here. And I guess when you put 1,000 worm there, it just tells you whether there's a blueprint. Do those worms do anything else in that tile once you drop them there?
Correct. So worms only go in and they will never come out. They are very sacrificial little creatures. But correct. So when I had the 2 blueprints on tiles 4 and 5 here, you can see based on the little fun art that I have worms all the way to the end here. But it's very possible that maybe I only deployed worms to tiles 1 and 2, but I continued to dig with egg all the way through tiles 5 and sitting on 6. So if that had been the case, I would still see the blueprints because I've already dug the tunnel. I can see that there's blueprints on 4 and 5, but I can't reach it yet because I got to put those worms in there to fill it up and send them all the way to where those blueprints are. So correct. They go in and they don't do anything other than give you discoverability of the blueprints and being able to claim them. So once I had the worms here and the blueprints there, I clicked on it. There was a claim button. I claimed it, and then I got the blueprints into my possession. So they have mentioned that the worms that a small amount of worms will also need to be sacrificed in order to craft the item. And that isn't live yet, but that's coming at the top of the new year. So your worms go in to discover, and then a small batch of them will actually be removed and burnt and destroyed in order to create the item itself. So
once you have the worms in there, like, because I think each square holds a certain amount of worms, and I think each successive square takes more worms.
Yeah.
If they sprinkle more blueprints in and they were in a square that you already had worms in, will it just say, oh, you can claim a blueprint here?
Yep. Yeah, if you're already discovered and you're already filled up, then yeah, it just is, hey, I got new blueprints, and you just claim them. So there's a lot of whales that have reached the bottom of the worm. Not a lot of whales. There's one whale that for sure has reached the bottom of his worm farm at some ridiculous level, and he's stuffed it all with worms. These are the people that make me sad because they're just so much, but you can't play the game like that. Like, I'm just enjoying at my speed, but that person has every tile on their worm farm revealed. So every time blueprints get sprinkled around, he can just go in and claim. When they go to craft, it will potentially reduce that population, and so they might have to put more worms in. But yes, once you're revealed here, anything that comes in, you can claim it, and there can also be multiple blueprints on a tile. So as I mentioned, as time goes on and more blueprints get sprinkled in, you could potentially hit a tile and there's like 4 blueprints on it, and you're like, dang, like that's awesome. I want to get there.
Now, is there a secondary market for the blueprints?
There is, and that is currently live. That starts to get now into where we can talk about investment strategies, or I don't like making it sound that official, but just ways to get ownership and potential value out of these assets. The last thing I'll say on the blueprints is I did mention this partner token, partner project token as a liquidity. So they are already partnering up with other vetted projects in the space. Their current partners, like, they've gone and had one-on-one meetings, and that's not to say everything's safe, but they're doing their due diligence to take this all very seriously and partner with like-minded partners. So the really cool thing about this worm farm is this can become a delivery mechanism for these partner projects. So they've already said, and there's one project that has provided 200 NFTs for their project, and those have been sprinkled through everybody's farmland. So while I just described blueprints, which are specifically useful in the Chikn ecosystem, there's also NFTs to other projects buried in here, character NFTs for another game, that sort of thing, which is just really starts to build this idea of like, that's a really cool way to deliver this, because people that are digging out their worm farm have that gamified mentality. And if you wanted to give your, character to a crowd that is in that game mindset, this is a really good delivery mechanism for rewarding them because of how committed to this ecosystem they are. But to the point of the marketplace, if we hop over to the website, we can see under the market that there is a chicken market, a rooster market, a farmland market, and now there is a blueprint market. And so we can go in here and we can see currently there have been no legendary blueprints discovered or listed, and no secret ones. These are, way down at the bottom of the worm farm. But we do have a stash of common as well as rare blueprints. And you can see the market is moving. It's been live for, I want to say 4 or 5 days now, and they're up to around, 378 AVAX of volume so far on 1,500 items. And you can see there's this retro arcade machine, the Avaxium seam that I mentioned that I had. You can see that over here. So I had one of those, and I actually sold one today, and it sold within a few hours for 5 AVAX, which is, at current prices, it's something. It's but it's, liquid. It was way more liquid than I expected. So a few strategies that come to mind then as means of, just getting some yield off of this, is obviously you have these tokens and those are worth something. They're being provided. So this is the game mechanics kind of cause this compounding effect if you stay invested in them. But there's also, Sprocket, like I said, had this feed strategy where he just wanted to stack feed and see where that went. There's a couple strategies of like, well, if people want these blueprints, then dig through, discover your blueprints, and if you don't care about playing the game, like you have those market rights to discover the blueprints and then go sell it on the market, go list it, and let somebody who wants to play the game buy it from you. Or like I said, these blueprints are uncrafted currently, so I also believe that they will be worth more when it's crafted. So if you have the ability to turn this log cabin into a crafted log cabin, which somebody can just buy and go plop it onto their farm right away, there's that strategy of craft the blueprints and then go sell those. So right now that strikes me as an interesting developing strategy of digging out your worm farm, potentially starting to fill it up. But you can dig it out without filling it up. Like I said, dig it out, see if you have blueprints there, go get them. Right now it's a smaller batch, but they said they're going to try to run like a 3 to 5 week cadence of dropping more blueprints, because there's a lot of items they want to seed the game with in the marketplace. Like I said, for preparations for when fighting PvP fighting goes live, as well as just, all the other gamified elements that they have. So currently that strikes me as interesting of, digging out the worm farm, selling those blueprints on the market.
Yeah, I have not deployed any of the worms. Maybe I should deploy some. I don't know. I've kind of hold on to them because I'm not really sure. Like, is this something where maybe I just cash in the worms for emissions from the game and just turn it all into AVAX? It's kind of where I've been going with my egg that I'm producing. I've kind of just been turning that over to AVAX to build up that stake, but I really haven't done anything with the worms because I just don't know what pays out more.
Yeah. And that's, perfectly valid as well, because I mean that's where I eventually started to come to with for me, my FERT pile is growing quite a lot because I paused. So initially I was doing kind of what you were doing, where I was getting I was kind of trying to split of like using, let's just say, it wasn't exactly half and half, but let's just say half of my emissions I was doing the compound loop of, like take egg to make more, bigger roosters, make more FERT, all that sort of thing. And then half of it trying to just take some profits off, like you said, convert it to AVAX. For our previous episode on building up an AVAX validator node. Um, but I've kind of paused all of that, and I'm just in mass collection mode because so much is shifting. I want to make sure that, I find and, calculate out and sniff out that, best path. I certainly have more of the gamified mentality of I'm very curious to see where this goes and wanting to build up a game stake, as well as try to take some healthy profits along the way. So that means I'm trying to hold out and figure out what helps me advance in the coming stages of the game versus more your mentality of trying to capture as much profits out of it as possible. So for me, one of the biggest things about fertilizer that I think is the next biggest, we'll call it the feed focus of, initially it was very obvious. Feed is going to be whether it will, I mean, we'll pretend like, not pretend, we don't know what it's going to happen on the price wise, but we knew it was going to run out and there was just a ton of hype and focus on feed. To me, I think FERT is going to have that potential because as the game becomes more of a game that, like right now, I'm sure most people looking at this don't even see this as a game. Like we're not there yet. It's still building, it's still rolling out. But when it gets to be a more familiar mobile game that you would play on your phone, the team has said that baby chickens are going to be the number one way to play the game at a very low cost, low barrier of entry. So right now, chickens are floating around $800 to $1,000 a piece. Roosters are floating around about a quarter of that. So like these are ridiculously high just to play a game. So there's going to be breeding between chicken and roosters to create baby. I'm dubbing them chicks. A lot of people, that seems natural. And we know it's going to take fertilizer tokens to produce these baby chicks. So my personal focus is for the gamified potential earnings is I want to have a lot of fertilizer because FERT is ever expanding, ever emitting. So future uses of it should probably be requiring more of it. So I'm going to see where it goes as a strategy to stack a whole bunch of FERT. And then when breeding goes live, those baby chicks will probably have a semi-saturated market, hence making it a low barrier entry for new players. So let's say $20 or $30 a baby, a chick. And so I'm curious to see if I have a whole bunch of fertilizer, if I can crank out the babies, crank out the chicks, and see if that is a viable path for some yield back of selling baby chicks.
Yeah, it will be interesting to see how it goes. I'll see how it holds my the man. I notice now the emissions of worm are so slow. So I used to have to empty my farmland, every 2 or 3 days. I I can really be passive now because that worm emission is very, very low for the amount of worm that my farm can hold.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. And there's a lot of hubbub in the community about that, and I've broken it down as basically being twofold. One, the feed emissions were just spoiled rotten. I mean, there was 100% unsustainable. The team has said they knew it was unsustainable, but they thought it was a risk worth taking because it was the risk of it influencing and ruining any of the other ecosystem was mitigated. You couldn't just pour it all into your chicken and start pumping out a whole ton of egg. Like there were cool downs and stuff like that. And the supply was capped. So they knew they would get to a point where the faucet stopped, the free money printer stopped going burr, and it was. I think it was handled pretty well. But this is the downside: is Worm is like they have a 5-year time frame in mind to emit this worm, and so therefore they have to be way more careful and sustainable with these worm emissions, which I appreciate that they're being careful with it, and it's very interesting to see where it goes. But it does mean instead of looking at a 120% APR on your farming capital, we're probably looking at a still very, healthy 15 to 20%, I think might be what I calculated out, or somewhere around there. But very shocking if you're used to unrealistically spoiled.
Hey, it just is another example of how I tell you all the time that this whole crypto world and this gamification is just a manifestation of all the things that happen in real life, you know?
Yeah.
What did we just do for the past, year plus? We had interest rates and free money out there and the printers were going brr. Then we stopped them and the whole thing's like, what's going on? And the market value kind of fell off. And now they're like, yeah, well, we can't just, print money forever. We got to make a soft landing and all this stuff. And hey,
Yep.
maybe it's a loose analogy, but I'm telling you, it's a lot of
Yep.
tie-ins.
No, I completely agree. I think that's in the, we'll call it, healthy approach to crypto that I believe that we've tried to emphasize on the show, of not taking, mess up your life if you lose it money, and just explore it. That, as I've explored all these little things, it's absolutely been like, man, this feels like I'm experiencing the history of economics on a 1000x sped up tape, because it's like, oh, this looks so cool, this could work, and then all of a sudden it's like, this just blew up. Why did it blow up? Well, because it was unsustainable, because it broke the laws of economics, and those are universal laws when you're talking about exchange of value and money.
Yeah, so that brings us to the end of this week's episode. Those 1% plays are out there. I think, we got to put some pressure here on Viper to make a play. Otherwise, it's going to fill up the chart with sprocket trades. And he's just going to try to pick one winner and say, look at me, I'm like 100%. Fortunately, he's got one loser on the books. So he's right now 100% loss. It's not looking good for 2 out of the 3 trades that I got on there. So we'll see how that pans out. I'll add this 4th trade here, the $20 scratcher on City. See when that one rings the register, or if we lose it all because City goes to 0. It was nice to touch on our favorite game, Chikn, to see how that is. To be honest, I was kind of lazy and reading up on all the stuff. I read it a couple times, and I'm like, man, this is kind of complicated. It was a lot easier when it was just save, feed, save. Now we got all these other aspects and angles, so I'll have to think a little bit about that. But yeah, I might deploy some of my worm in the coming days and see if I've got any of the blueprints hanging around. I guess I got to dig the things first with egg. But anyway, I got some of that stuff, so we'll see how that goes. Holiday coming up here. Market's going to be pick up a couple of observation days of closure. Santa Claus rally might be upon us. And then we got what does 23 hold? Lots of uncertainty there. So good luck out there on whatever it is that you're looking up, whatever it is you're trading. Always remember, think outside the block.